Welcome back to episode 3 of my deep dive into the screenplay for Joker. In my previous video, I indicated that the subway killings in Joker function as the Act 1 turn, even though I don't think it's a very good one because it doesn't create a clear dramatic problem for Arthur to solve. This video picks up immediately after that turn. But the deeper that I analyzed the screenplay, the harder it became to actually identify a stable midpoint, a structural movement. Joker keeps opening narrative threads that seem like they might become the central engine of the story before dissolving into another explanation for Arthur's transformation. So rather than forcing an artificial midpoint structure into the movie, I want to look at each major thread and ask the following questions. What do the writers seem to think that this thread is accomplishing? Why doesn't it fully work structurally? And what do the changes between the drafts reveal about the problem? Let's start with Sophie. Sophie is clearly intended to represent Arthur's final emotional connection to ordinary human life. She symbolizes intimacy, companionship, and the possibility that some part of Arthur is still capable of normal emotional attachment. That's why the reveal works in theory. When Arthur enters Sophie's apartment later in the movie and we realize that their relationship never existed, the screenplay wants that moment to feel like the final psychic collapse. Arthur has now completely lost touch with reality. His last tether to humanity is gone. But structurally, Sophie barely functions as an active force before the reveal. After the subway killings, Arthur, he's got this confidence and he goes to her apartment and he kisses her. And then she pretty much just completely disappears from the movie. She sits there watching him at the comedy club. She's sitting next to him at the hospital after Penny collapses. But that's about it. She never interacts with Arthur in any sort of meaningful way after the kiss. She doesn't challenge him. She doesn't redirect his behavior. She doesn't oppose his worldview. She doesn't force him to make difficult choices because she's not actively tethering Arthur to humanity. She's symbolically representing the idea that he has a tether. And that distinction matters because the reveal only works structurally if the relationship was functioning as an actual dramatic anchor beforehand. If Sophie had been pushing Arthur towards a different life, or forcing him to choose between connection and violence, or representing a real worldview in opposition to his collapse, then losing her would mean something structurally. But Arthur is already psychologically detached before the reveal. He has no real relationships, no social interaction. He's already violent and unstable long before we discover that the relationship was imaginary. And this is where the draft comparison is interesting. In the earlier April draft, Sophie is more active. After Arthur's comedy performance, she actually talks with him about the subway murders. She says the rich guys probably deserved it, and she even calls the killer a hero. And that's a major difference. In that version, Sophie isn't just a fantasy girlfriend. She briefly functions as someone who reinforces Arthur's emerging worldview, and she validates the violence. She gives him ideological permission, and she connects the romantic thread to the class resentment thread. But that doesn't fix the structure. It just makes her more dramatically useful. So here is where we have to compare Sophie to Tyler Durden in Fight Club. In Fight Club, Tyler Durden's reveal reorganizes the entire movie because Tyler was structurally integrated into the narrative beforehand. They were inextricably intertwined. Tyler drives causality. He escalates the conflict constantly. He creates Project Mayhem. He radicalizes the narrator and he pushes the plot forward. So when the reveal happens, the protagonist's understanding changes, the stakes change, and the direction of the story changes immediately. Just think about Fight Club from the perspective of Marla Singer. When it's revealed that Tyler doesn't exist, all of a sudden you start thinking about all of this abuse that narrator has put Marla through by dismissing her after being sexual with her. It's tragic. It's horrific. It redefines narrator, not just the plot, but the character and everything that he did up to that moment. But in Joker, Sophie barely does anything before the reveal. On to the second thread. Thomas Wayne. This is the closest thing that Joker comes to having a functional dramatic spine, because it briefly gives Arthur a concrete pursuit. Once Arthur reads Penny's letter and believes Thomas Wayne may be his father, the movie finally develops forward momentum. Arthur goes to Wayne Manor. He confronts Alfred. He seeks out Wayne directly. He investigates Penny's history at Arkham. This is why reading the letter is probably the strongest candidate for a true midpoint, because it redirects the movie into a new line of action. But it still doesn't fully work as a midpoint. Why? Because a true midpoint should explode or transform the protagonist's Act 2 mission. It should force a new strategy because the first strategy has failed or evolved. That is not what happens here. Arthur does not arrive at the Wayne pursuit because his first mission collapses. The plot just hands him a new piece of information. He reads the letter, and suddenly the movie becomes about Wayne. That's a direction, but it's not the payoff to a sustained dramatic engine. And once the Wayne thread begins, it immediately collapses. Wayne rejects him. Arkham reveals Penny's delusions and abuse. Arthur learns the truth, and then he kills his mother. Instead of building sustained dramatic escalation, the thread just converts into backstory exposition. The April draft and the December shooting draft both use the revelation that Arthur may be Wayne's son as the midpoint. The specific language changes slightly, but the function is the same. Arthur suddenly believes his identity connects to Thomas Wayne. The later draft streamlines the material. It moves more efficiently from the letter to Wayne Manor, to Alfred, to Wayne, to Arkham. It's cleaner. But cleaner doesn't mean better. The rewrite improves momentum, but the Wayne thread is still externally introduced and it still burns out quickly. It also exposes one of Joker's biggest causal logical problems. Let's just walk through it. Arthur goes to Wayne Manor and he interacts with Bruce by literally putting his fingers inside this child's mouth. And then Alfred comes over and Arthur physically assaults him. And Alfred knows who Arthur is. In both the script logic and the world logic, this should have created massive consequences. Alfred should have called the police. There should have been security on the premises. Thomas Wayne is like running for mayor. He's one of the most powerful people in Gotham City. And Arthur is already loosely connected to this clown-related murder investigation. They should be coming after Arthur, but they don't. Why? Because the story needed to have Arthur interact with the Wayne world, but it had no interest in the fallout. The bathroom confrontation with Wayne works the same way. Wayne initially treats Arthur like a stranger, but then all of a sudden he delivers the exact type of exposition that the scene requires. Penny was delusional. Arthur was adopted. The fantasy is false. In the April draft, Wayne explicitly says that Arthur was adopted and that he never slept with his mother. So the scene is emotionally useful, but mechanically it's convenient, and it doesn't really make any sense logically whatsoever. Let's just move on to thread number 3, medication and social systems. Early in the movie, the writers want Gotham itself to feel partially responsible for creating Joker. Arthur loses therapy. He loses medication. The funding disappears. The system abandons him. The intended thematic argument is straightforward. Society creates monsters through neglect. Okay. That's what I'm talking about, where, you know, you have themes and statements and things floating around, but you don't settle on a single yes or no thematic question that everybody can answer. Because society creating monsters, sure, that's a statement, it's a theme, but where does it get you? As a writer, where does it get you? And how does it connect everybody? It doesn't. This thread exists in both drafts. The social worker tells Arthur that the city's cutting funding. Arthur's immediate concern is how he'll get his medication. So that should be a major structural problem. But it never becomes an active dramatic engine because Arthur does not meaningfully engage with it whatsoever. He doesn't try to regain treatment. He doesn't search for alternatives. He doesn't pursue stability. He doesn't make choices around staying medicated or surviving without medication. The medication cuts create emotional pressure, but they don't generate any dramatic pursuit. And later, the screenplay weakens its own institutional critique because the Arkham revelations imply that Arthur's damage long predates the funding cuts. So now the movie is juggling social neglect, mental illness, childhood abuse, poverty, humiliation, emotional isolation, all without organizing them into a clear hierarchy. And yes, you can have a movie where all of these things exist and they can all be true, but they have to connect to each other. And Joker doesn't connect them, Joker stacks them. The fourth thread is the clown movement. After the subway killings, Gotham transforms Arthur's violence into this political symbol. Clown masks spread, public unrest escalates, city projects meaning onto the murders. It's eat the rich, right? Eat the rich. That's what this part of the movie's about. And the writers want Arthur to become mythic by accident. That idea is present across both drafts, but the later shooting script leans harder into it visually and politically. The problem is that Arthur contributes almost nothing to this movement's development. He doesn't organize it. He doesn't shape its ideology. He doesn't manipulate public anger. He barely engages with it at all. This is one of the main reasons the second act feels so unstable. The world is escalating around Arthur, but Arthur is not meaningfully driving any of that escalation. Which brings us to our fifth thread, Murray Franklin. Murray represents recognition. He represents validation, public visibility. He's a symbolic father figure that Arthur actually wants. He's a mirror to what Thomas Wayne ends up being, or at least in Arthur's mind, that's what he is. The screenplay believes that it's building towards Arthur finally being seen in the world, and emotionally, the climax works because the movie understands the symbolic power of putting Joker on that stage and in front of that audience. But the progression into that climax is extremely weak from a causality perspective. Arthur bombs at stand-up. The footage is somehow recorded. It somehow reaches Murray. Murray airs it, and Arthur gets invited onto the show. The issue isn't plausibility. The issue is agency. Arthur is not strategically pursuing Murray. He's not trying to get on television. He's not escalating towards public recognition through a plan. The opportunity arrives externally because the screenplay needs him to be on the stage for the climax to exist. I have spoken about this in my other videos. This was an easy fix by just having the open mic night be directly connected to Murray by showing Murray early on, roasting other comics or being an insult comic, or, promoting the open mic, something to give Arthur a reason. If mission one in the first half of Act 2 was, I'm going to get seen, I'm going to be a comedian, I'm going to get on Murray, and I'm going to show Sophie that I'm worth something, that I'm worth being taken serious, everything else kind of starts to fall into place, right? It starts to make sense causally as the dominoes start to fall, instead of just these random things sort of happening. And when we talk about Murray, we're really talking about the last stage in the Joker transformation imagery. In the earlier April draft, the subway aftermath is way more panic. It's got shame, instability. Arthur vomits. He deals with the gun, washes himself off, and the sequence plays out more like a psychological fallout. In the later shooting draft, the bathroom aftermath becomes this transformational ritual. Arthur enters the bathroom overwhelmed. He performs this slow physical awakening, foot out, arm rising, turning as if something inside him is awakening, and then the Buffalo Bill, Silence of the Lambs, full reveal in the mirror. This is who I am. The rewrite turns guilt and panic into mythic emergence, and the later draft sharpens the Act 2 turn through performance imagery. Arthur prepares his Joker look. He spins to the music. He applies makeup. He kills Randall. And he descends the stairs, and he moves towards Murray. The screenplay becomes much more confident about Joker as movement, performance, and iconography. So the movie has several moments that feel like midpoints, but none of them actually function as one. And that's the same problem that the film has with its lowest point. What's the lowest point of the movie? What brings us into Act 3? Is it Sophie? Is it Wayne? Is it Arkham? Is it Penny? Is it Randall? Each scene is emotionally heavy, but none clearly destroy a stable Act 2 mission because the movie never really established one. That's an architectural problem. So this is the point where we can't avoid the taxi driver comparison any longer. Taxi Driver also begins with alienation and disgust and loneliness and urban rot. Travis Bickle is already deteriorating. The city feeds his disdain for humanity. But the movie layers that emotional deterioration onto a clear causal chain. Betsy enters as a positive alternative worldview. She represents connection, normalcy, social interaction. Travis pursues her because some part of him still believes that he can enter ordinary human life, much like Arthur. But he pursues her using the exact same worldview and strategies and psychology that he has already built up in his head. He doesn't try to adapt himself to her world. He tries to bring her into his, which is why he takes her to the porn theater. To Travis, that choice makes complete sense because his understanding of intimacy is already poisoned by the environment that's consuming. When Betsy rejects him, he cannot recognize that he sabotaged the relationship. He cannot blame himself, so he externalizes the failure. He lashes out at Betsy. His resentment broadens towards society, and then he projects that onto the senator, and then towards sport and the prostitution ring surrounding Iris. Every emotional failure redirects his behavior. The failed relationship intensifies his alienation. The alienation mutates into violent purification fantasies. He buys guns. He trains. He prepares for assassination. When that strategy fails, he redirects again. He reframes himself as a savior and projects meaning onto rescuing Iris. The emotional work is layered on top of a causal spine: worldview, strategy, failure, redirection, escalation. Joker has the emotional deterioration. It has the mood. It has the iconic images. It has the performance. But it rarely builds Arthur's transformation through the same kind of sustained protagonist-driven causality. That's why Joker feels powerful as mood and imagery while still feeling dramatically ungrounded underneath the surface. In my next video, I'll finish this deep dive into Joker by going through Act 3 and the climax, which, to be clear, I really like the climax of Joker. I wish the rest of the movie built to it better so that it would fit better, but on its own, I think the third act of Joker would have been a great one-act play. So let me know in the comments if you disagree with anything I've had to say or if you have something to contribute to this conversation. And if you like this kind of content, come back to the channel for more breakdowns, videos on screenplay architecture, and all sorts of other fun stuff. So until next page, I'm Matt Weiner, and this is Fade In, a channel dedicated to the art of screenwriting.